Chilly, chilly fall. Close your eyes now. Someone's walking outside and knocks on the door.
It was the summer of my 23rd year, and I had decided to spend a week alone at my family's beach house. The house was old, weathered by decades of salt air and storms, but it had always been a place of peace for me. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and the nights were so quiet you could hear the waves crashing a mile away. I arrived late in the evening, the sun already dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air smelled like salt and seaweed, and the breeze carried the faint sound of seagulls calling in the distance. I unpacked my bags, made myself a quick dinner, and settled onto the porch with a book, letting the sound of the ocean lull me into relaxation. But as the night deepened, something felt off. The usual serenity of the beach house was replaced by an uneasy stillness, as if the world was holding its breath. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't ignore the chill that crept up my spine. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night. I locked the doors, checked the windows, and climbed into bed, hoping sleep would come quickly. But just as I was drifting off, I heard it. A faint knocking sound coming from somewhere downstairs. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The knocking was soft, almost hesitant, but it was unmistakable. I told myself it was just the wind or maybe an animal outside, but deep down I knew better. I grabbed my phone and crept downstairs, my footsteps muffled by the old wooden floors. The knocking grew louder as I approached the front door, and I could see a shadow moving through the frosted glass. My hand trembled as I reached for the lock, but I stopped myself. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no answer, only silence. I peered through the peephole, but the porch was empty. The shadow was gone. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing with possibilities. Finally, I convinced myself it was nothing and went back to bed, though sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The sun was shining, and the eerie feeling from the night before had faded. I decided to spend the day exploring the beach, hoping to clear my head. The sand was warm beneath my feet, and the ocean sparkled under the bright summer sun. I walked for hours, collecting seashells and watching the tide roll in and out. By the time I returned to the house, I felt refreshed, the strange events of the previous night almost forgotten. But as the sun began to set, the unease returned. I tried to distract myself by cooking dinner and reading, but the silence of the house felt oppressive. I kept glancing at the windows, half expecting to see someone or something staring back at me. When I finally went to bed, I made sure to lock my bedroom door, something I had never done before. I was jolted awake in the middle of the night by a loud crash. My heart raced as I sat up in bed, straining to hear where the noise had come from. It sounded like it had come from downstairs near the kitchen. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, my hands trembling. I crept out of my room and down the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. When I reached the kitchen, I found a shattered glass on the floor, the remnants of a cup I had left on the counter earlier. I sighed in relief, assuming it had just fallen on its own. But as I bent down to clean it up, I noticed something strange, a wet footprint on the tile floor, leading toward the back door. My blood ran cold. The print was large, too large to be mine, and it was fresh. I followed the trail to the door, which was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped outside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The backyard was empty, but the gate leading to the beach was swinging open, as if someone had just passed through. I hesitated, then decided to investigate. The sand was cool beneath my feet, and the moon cast an eerie glow over the shoreline. As I walked toward the water, I noticed something lying in the sand, a piece of fabric, torn and damp, as if it had been dragged through the waves. I picked it up and examined it, my heart pounding. It was a piece of a shirt, dark and stained with something that looked like blood. I dropped it and backed away, my mind racing. Who had been in my house, and where were they now? I turned to run back to the house, but as I did, I heard a low, guttural sound coming from the water. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The sound grew louder, a mix of a groan and a growl, and I saw something moving in the waves. It was large and dark, its shape indistinct but undeniably alive. I didn't wait to see what it was. I ran back to the house as fast as I could, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me.
I spent the rest of the night in my room, clutching a knife I had taken from the kitchen. I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep, not with the image of that thing in the water burned into my mind. When morning finally came, I called the police, but they found nothing. No footprints, no fabric, no sign of an intruder. They suggested it might have been an animal, but I knew better. Whatever had been in my house, whatever I had seen in the water, it wasn't an animal. I decided to cut my trip short and leave that afternoon. As I packed my bags, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I loaded my car quickly, not bothering to look back at the house, but as I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw something that made my blood run cold. Standing on the shore just beyond the waves was a figure, tall and dark, its features obscured by the distance. It didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, watching me leave. I never went back to that beach house. My family sold it a year later, and I've never asked why. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and I wonder if whatever was out there is still waiting, watching, for someone else to come home. The days that followed my return home were a blur. I tried to convince myself that what I had experienced was just a figment of my imagination, a product of stress or exhaustion. But the memory of that figure on the shore haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't done with me, that it was still out there, waiting. A week after I returned, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box with no return address. My hands trembled as I opened it, and inside I found a single item, a seashell, perfectly intact and polished to a glossy sheen. At first I thought it was a gift from a friend or family member, but then I noticed something etched into the surface. It was a symbol, crude and jagged, like it had been carved with a knife. I didn't recognize it, but it sent a chill down my spine. I showed the shell to a friend who was into occult symbolism, and her reaction was immediate. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice tense. I told her about the beach house and the figure on the shore, and she grew pale. "This symbol," she said, pointing to the etching, "is associated with old coastal legends. It's said to mark places where the veil between worlds is thin, where things from the deep can cross over." Her words stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I tried to dismiss them as superstition, but deep down, I knew there was truth to them. The figure on the shore, the wet footprints, the blood-stained fabric, it all pointed to something far beyond my understanding. A few nights later, I had a dream. I was back at the beach house, standing on the porch as the sun set. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay, and the waves crashed against the shore with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound. I looked out at the water and saw it again, the dark figure, standing just beyond the waves. This time it was closer, close enough that I could make out its features. Its face was twisted and grotesque, its eyes hollow and black, and its mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin. It raised a hand, beckoning me forward, and I felt an irresistible pull, as if the very air around me was drawing me toward it. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The dream felt so real, so vivid, that I could still smell the salt in the air. I knew then that I couldn't ignore what was happening. I had to go back to the beach house to confront whatever was out there. The drive back was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white and my mind raced with every possible scenario. What would I find when I got there? Would the figure be waiting for me? Or would the house be empty? A silent reminder of the horrors I had experienced. When I arrived, the house looked just as I had left it, old and weathered but still standing. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the sand, and the air was thick with the smell of salt and seaweed. I stepped out of the car and took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I had brought a flashlight, a knife, and a camera, determined to document whatever I found. I approached the house slowly, my footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. The front door was slightly ajar, just as I had left it, and I pushed it open with a creak. The interior was dark and silent, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. I turned on my flashlight and stepped inside, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The house was exactly as I had left it, but there was something different, something off. The air felt heavier, more oppressive, and the silence was deafening. I made my way to the kitchen, where I had found the shattered glass, and saw that the floor was still covered in shards. But there was something else, a trail of wet footprints leading from the back door to the stairs. My heart raced as I followed the trail, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The footprints led up the stairs and down the hallway, stopping at the door to my old bedroom. I pushed the door open slowly, my breath catching in my throat. The room was empty, but the window was open, the curtains fluttering in the breeze. And on the bed, lying in the center, was another seashell, identical to the one I had received at the mail. I picked it up and examined it, my hands shaking. The same symbol was etched into its surface, crude and jagged. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized what it meant. The figure was here, in the house, and it was watching me. I turned to leave, but as I did, I heard a sound, a low, guttural growl coming from the hallway. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound grew louder, closer, and I saw a shadow moving in the darkness. I raised my flashlight, the beam of light cutting through the gloom, and there it was, the figure, standing at the end of the hallway, its hollow eyes fixed on me. I didn't wait to see what it would do. I ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty house. I burst out the front door and into the night, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my hands fumbling with the keys as I tried to start the engine. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw it again, the figure standing on the shore watching me leave. I never went back to that beach house. My family sold it soon after, and I've never asked why. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and I wonder if whatever was out there is still waiting, watching, for someone else to come home.